everybody, and welcome to our lecture this evening with Dean Emilie Towns. This is the fourth lecture in our joint lecture series with Philander Smith College, our sister United Methodist College down in Little Rock. The series has been entitled Faith in Black and White, the Church and Race in Colorblind America. And the word colorblind, if you see the printed version, is in quotes. Because our suggestion has been that the point is not to not see race, or to pretend that we don't see race, but to acknowledge it and to figure out how we learn to work together and build relationships with each other that result in justice. Our first speaker in the series down at Philander Smith on Martin Luther King Day was Judge Wendell Griffin, who has joined us here in the second row, so it's good to see you, Judge Griffin. I'm glad you're here. Our second speaker here at Hendrix was the Reverend Dr. F. Willis Johnson, who is pastor at Wellspring Church in Ferguson, Missouri. He was here back in February. Our third speaker, Nisha Jr. from Temple University in Philadelphia, unfortunately got caught in that big snowstorm in Philadelphia back in March, and so she did not make it, but she will be here in the fall, either in September or October. So keep an eye out for that. And tonight is the final lecture in that series with Dean Towns. I wanted to introduce just a couple of folks quickly before we get started. First, there have been two student groups, one at Hendrix and one at Philander, that have been coming to these lecture series and thinking about the question of racial justice this semester. So I want to point you to Reverend Ronnie Miller-Yao back here, and the students from Philander who are sitting here as well. So welcome, everybody. And then we also have a group of Hendrix students who are here tonight, who are also sitting in this corner over here, who have been thinking together about race for the semester. So welcome to you all as well, even though you're always arguing. This lecture series has been co-sponsored by Hendrix College and also by Philander Smith. At Philander Smith, it's been co-sponsored out of the Office of Religious Life, to whom we are very grateful. Here at Hendrix, it's been co-sponsored by the Margaret Barry Hutton Odyssey Professorship, which I share with Dr. Leslie Zorwick in the Psychology Department, who's sitting down here. And we have also been co-sponsored by the Marshall T. Steele Center for the Study of Religion and Philosophy here at Hendrix. We've been very grateful to the support of our college administration in helping this series come together, so I just wanted to say thank you to a couple of folks. First is our Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion, Dr. Deon Jackson, who's sitting down here. And then secondly, I would like to introduce to you, most of you know him, but our President, Bill Tsutsui, who is going to extend a welcome on behalf of the college. So please join me in welcoming Bill Tsutsui.
Well, thanks so much, Bobby, and good evening to y'all. I want to welcome Dean Towns. I'm so thrilled to have her with us tonight. It's an honor to have you on campus. I am also so happy to see such a big crowd this evening. A particular welcome to the students from Philander. It's always a joy to have you on campus, and it's a pleasure to see Reverend Miller-Yao again. So thank you for being here. I can't tell you how excited I am to see this collaborative project with Philander come to reality. And I really hope it is just one of many in the coming years. At the instigation of President Roderick Smothers at Philander, we had a joint meeting of the senior leadership teams of the two institutions, I guess, about a year ago now. We had some great discussions. We began on conversations about some collaborations, but we're still working to bring those into reality. I think that just goes to prove that sometimes the best partnerships begin at the grassroots. And what I love about this is that it's members of the faculty and staff here at Hendrix and Philander who had a great idea, decided to work together, and made it happen. So I really want to give huge kudos to Bobby Williamson, to Leslie Zorwick, to the Steele Center, to Reverend Miller-Yao, and all the folks at Philander who made this possible. Can we give them a round of applause, please? Now, racial justice is a topic that I think is pretty hard to avoid these days, although many organizations and individuals in our society may be trying very hard to do so. At Hendrix, we have tried to make a start on discussions and actions on diversity, inclusion, and justice, but needless to say, we still have a long way to go. I just wanted to point briefly to some of the things we've been doing, which will hopefully be a start on great accomplishments ahead. We have a new statement on diversity, written by our faculty, students, and staff, approved by the faculty, and approved by the Board of Trustees. I encourage you, if you have not read it, and I hope all of you who are Hendrix students, faculty, and staff have, please do review it on our website. We have, she's no longer a new Chief Diversity Officer and Vice President, a relatively new Chief Diversity Officer in Dr. Dion Jackson. She hit the ground absolutely running, bringing an incredible passion and energy to this job. And if anything stands a good chance of making a huge difference on this campus going forward, it is the work that she does. And so that is something very exciting for us. We have a new Diversity and Inclusion Committee on the Board of Trustees. We, in fact, created this committee 1 week before Princeton University created a similar committee on their board. When Princeton did it, it made the front page of the New York Times. When we did it, it didn't even get into the Log Cabin Democrat. But that doesn't matter, okay? It's about the impact which it has on this community down the road. We have taken assertive steps to diversify our student body through partnerships with schools and organizations in Little Rock and the Delta, and significant new programs to support students with the greatest need financially, especially through the Aspire scholarships and the Hendrix Arkansas Advantage programs. We have been building support structures for more inclusive community and seeking to bring diverse perspectives to our curriculum through a grant we received for $500,000 from the Mellon Foundation. We are beginning plans to offer more classes and more curricular options for our students in social justice. This is something that Dr. Jackson's been working on with Dr. Ann Goldberg here at Hendrix. And there's more work than I can mention in all parts of campus, sort of seeping up from various offices, individuals, and initiatives to address issues of diversity, inclusion, and social justice. Coming out of the chaplain's office through the good work of J.J. Whitney, the Miller Center, the Diversity Concerns Committee. Have y'all changed your name yet? You are, thank goodness.
We're now the Committee for Diversity and Dialogue.
Thank you, that's a big improvement. The Committee for Diversity and Dialogue, the Odyssey Program, Student Affairs, I saw the Dean here a minute ago, and the list goes on and on. All this adds up, I think, to a real commitment to progress, a testament to the goodwill and hard work of so many folks on this campus. And as I said, even though we still have a long ways to go here at Hendrix, and I think we all acknowledge that, I believe that we are now building that kind of commitment and action necessary to make some real progress in the years ahead. Let me just close by underlining the fact that this series of talks focuses on the role of faith and religious organizations in the work of social justice. Given Hendrix's historic and vibrant ongoing ties with the United Methodist Church and our strong commitment to support the work of the United Methodist Church and other faith communities in Central Arkansas, this focus, I think, is very, very appropriate. Just as Hendrix is extremely eager to partner with Philander, we are also enthusiastic about working with local churches, pastors, congregations, organizations, and individuals from all faith traditions to further the conversations we're having this evening and to work together on ways to bring meaningful change. We will be stronger and we will be more successful if we work together. And I hope this series and the whole lecture series that this is part of can be starting points for much more meaningful discussion, cooperation, and progress in the days, months, and years ahead. Thank you all for being here. It means a lot. And now I really want to hear Dean Towns speak.
But instead, instead of Dean Towns, you get more of me. Sorry about that. So it is my pleasure to introduce Dean Towns to you. The Reverend Dr. Emilie Towns is the Dean of Vanderbilt Divinity School and also the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Professor of Womanist Ethics at Vanderbilt Divinity School. Dr. Towns is a leading figure in the field of womanist Christian theology and ethics in particular. For those who may not be familiar with the term, womanist refers to bringing in the experience of African American women, both present day and her own experience, and also African American women from history and from family into the conversation with more traditional sources of Christian theology in ways that are critical and productive. She has been particularly interested in bringing her theological perspective into engagement with issues such as healthcare, economic justice, poetry, and literary theory. Many of you may be familiar with her groundbreaking work published in 2006 called Womanist Ethics and the Cultural Production of Evil. That book was groundbreaking when it was published and has become a foundational text not only for womanist theology, but for anyone who is interested in doing Christian theology in our context. That book is for sale out in the lobby, and so if you would like to pick up a copy, I encourage you to do so. Dr. Towns earned her bachelor's and master's degrees from the University of Chicago and her PhD from Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary and Northwestern University in Chicago. She was professor and associate dean of academic affairs at Yale University before moving to Vanderbilt, and at Union Theological Seminary in the city of New York before that. She is the recent past president of the Society for the Study of Black Religion, and she was the first African American woman to be elected as the president of the American Academy of Religion, which is the flagship guild for religious studies and theology in the United States. In addition to her remarkably distinguished scholarly career, Dean Towns is also an ordained American Baptist clergywoman, and she thinks deeply about, not only about theology in the abstract, but specifically about how theology interacts with Christian life and the life of the church. So it is an honor and privilege for us to have Dean Towns with us tonight. Please join me in welcoming her.
Good evening. It's good to see you all here. And I would be less a dean if I did not say we would be happy to be in partnership with Hendrix as a divinity school as you send folks on, and also we've got a little something going on. We have a new collaborative on public theology and racial justice that is just launching now, actually. And we want to build networks. So I may be talking to you all. So those who were with me at dinner know that I have, is this time again? I think these mics don't like me. Hello? No? Hello?
I just AV muted.
Yeah,
It turns off the whole system. Well, then the system is off. As with many things at Hendrix, this was all my fault.
How's it? I think that's it now. For those who were with me at the early part of dinner this evening, you know that I did what a lot of black pastors do. I changed the title. So the new title is Organic Faith. I grew up in a world in which the folks around me valued language. Family and neighborhood storytellers and teachers, grade and Sunday school, filled my days and nights with a world of painted word ideas, Bible stories, everyday conversations, and more. Before I knew that the name for this word is the poetic, it became a strong vehicle that helped me negotiate the southern world of Durham, North Carolina in the late 1950s and 60s. Growing up in a once common trans-class community, my playmates' parents were grade school teachers and principals, tobacco factory workers, secretaries, lawyers, home-based hairdressers, professors at North Carolina College, later to become North Carolina Central University, stay-at-home mothers, women of ill repute, doctors, police officers, nurses, dentists, and the woman who kept the children of parents who both worked. This was a world in which we participated in school plays, diction competitions, and church Bible contests where we were judged by the knowledge of the Bible verses and diction. This wonderful and sometimes maddening world of words also taught me about ideas and how to shape them and own them. I was taught to listen closely and watch carefully as those adults around me went about the business of being grown-ups, so that when I eventually reached the age when I would be held responsible for what I thought and how I said it, that I would know how to do so responsibly and well. This was a deeply black religious world that was filled with the smells of lemon polish on church pews, nurses in their white uniforms who helped revive those who were caught up in religious ecstasy and then collapsed or were just showing out. Fiery preaching, quiet preaching, good sermons, pitiful sermons, and exceedingly bad sermons. The choirs of my growing up years ranged the gamut from wonderful to those who made a joyful noise, literally, to the Lord. In Sunday school, we were taught about the miracles of the Bible, the importance of faith, the love that the sweet baby Jesus had for each of us, and that he loved all the little children of the world, red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in his sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. And I believe this, and still do, with all my heart and soul. Jesus loves all the little children of the world. I was a black middle-class girl in the South in the late 50s and 60s and 70s. This filled me with a host of experiences and memories that continue to shape me today. I learned about class and gender, race and sexuality from the black and white folks around me, and it was an education that was often puzzling because of the isms that often flowed from the ways we think about our isness. And far too often we judge one another on our differences rather than see them as part of the Holy's grand design. And my first lesson was about race. When I was in 3rd grade, I decided to read every book in my elementary school's library. Looking back, I cannot say just how large an undertaking this was at the time. Federal Street Elementary School was like many black public schools of the era, segregated by color and resources, contained in one large room that I thought was huge through my 8-year-old eyes. Like so many of the spaces of my youth that appeared huge at the time, they tended to shrink in size as I have aged. But then, it was an enormous room, And even better, it was filled with books. Our teachers, like Mrs. Carter and Ms. Walker, paid for things to supplement our learning out of their paychecks. And all of the kids ended every sentence we spoke to an adult with ma'am or sir. I'm not sure I undertook this challenge as a quest for knowledge, though it was sure to come. No, I thought of it as a great adventure to see if I could read every book before I left for junior high school, as a way of testing my reading ability and the fact that books were there, calling to me as one of those odd children, as many adults would say, who loved reading and mourned each summer's coming, because that meant school was out, and the fun of organized learning was 3 long months away. So I set off on my adventure, starting from the far side of the library, picking up book after book. The first sections of books were Greek and Roman mythologies. I had never heard of such from Reverend Moore's weekly sermons, and certainly not in Ms. Minor's Sunday school class. This was my personal quest, and I loved carrying it on by myself until I hit the encyclopedias at the far end of the room, just a few shelves away from attaining my goal. It was late in my 4th grade year when I braced myself as I picked up the first World Book Encyclopedia and began to read. I was in the S volume when I hit the article on slavery. Actually, it was like a gut punch. This was 1964. I was old enough to understand fire hoses and sit-ins and picketing, marches, and President Kennedy's assassination. I was being raised by parents who took great pride in being black folk who carried themselves with dignity, as did the other adults in our community and in my church, and passed this on to my playmates and me. What did I find that sucked the wind out of me in that article? Cartoonish and offensive caricatures of black folk eating watermelons, stereotypes of smiling black folk working in the fields, a monstrous cavalcade of sambos and mammies and pickaninnies. With all the righteous indignation that a then 9-year-old could muster, I went to the librarian and my teacher with my fingers marking the page in the encyclopedia. They could tell from my face that something was wrong. All I could do was open the page and say, "This is not right." They too were stunned and assured me that they would deal with this. When I got home that night, I told my parents what I had found at school, and we took out our copy of the S volume and were relieved to find that the more recent edition did not contain these caricatures. It has been well over 50 years since I began my library adventure and discovered that dated S volumes. The teachers did handle it. I imagine the teachers went marching to the principal's office akimbo, and the principal agreed to buy the newest edition that no longer had those violent images, and that old set of encyclopedias was taken off the shelves before the new one arrived. How many of that S volume do we have still in our academic disciplines, in our schools, in our communities, secular and or religious, in our hearts? And how can you and I model what my teachers did and provide others with larger and more accurate visions of who we are and how we can be in the household of God? We sometimes forget the power of this kind of organic education that raises most, if not all of us. We learned about things like race and gender and class and sexuality from the people around us, what we see in the media, what we do or don't experience in our communities and cities, what is taught in our religious households. Over the years, I have taken this kind of education and tried to think about it in faith terms, to shape and mold an organic faith to face injustice, where we dream, where we use our imagination, our religious beliefs, and our moral ideals to build a better place for all of us to live in. Be it Brian Stevenson's Getting Proximate, or William Barber's Moral Revolution of Values. It is a faith and imagination that helps us stop and listen to one another, learn from each other, start seeking information that comes from more than one source, and seek widely from those we agree with and those with whom we might not necessarily agree with. We confront our fears, uncover the stereotypes we harbor about others and ourselves, question our certainty, and grow our spirituality and our social witness together. An organic faith that confronts injustice encourages us to craft new images and realities that counter fire hoses, police dogs, Fergusons, Baltimores, lynching trees, Charlestons, Orlandos, and so much more that devalues and denigrates life. These are the harsh and demonic stepchildren of what I call the fantastic hegemonic imagination. This kind of imagination traffics in people's lives to create caricatures of who we are that then become stereotypes. But we think they're true and historic. And the rich diversities in our midst are seen as overly sentimental distractions rather than as flesh and blood and spirit. This imagination conjures worlds and their social structures that are based on the ordinariness of evil. It is this imagination that helps to hold systemic, structural evil in place because we pass off its caricatures as knowledge. And it spawns generation after generation as we teach to oppress. So in must come counter-memory, an imagination that liberates and educates for transformation. Counter-memory as a key resource for organic faith because it recognizes that you and I and countless others are thinking, feeling, sensing, doing human beings. And yes, I mean all of us. The use of counter-memory refuses to measure all of our realities by ideological stereotypes. It resists the scatological moonshine of the gross commodification of human lives in which people are reduced to profit margins or name brand products. There are days when I lean heavily on counter-memory because it can sometimes feel like I and others are rearranging the deck chairs on our pedagogical and spiritual Titanics when it comes to dealing with incredibly complex bodies that are often fueled by heterosexism, empire, racism, imperialism, homophobia, and far too much more. Days when it feels as though integrity has packed its bags, and hope is quickly following it out the door, and love is hitchhiking up the intergalactic highway. The deadly pipe dream of post-racial is a tool of the fantastic hegemonic imagination. Post-racialism is a don't worry and why the hell aren't you happy mentality that thrives on simplistic analysis masquerading as ultimate solutions.
Amen.
Things like having had a black president means that we don't have to talk about race anymore. Believing, feeling, and acting as though we are past racism when we put Obama in the White House, now let's ponder that image for a moment, is inept social analysis and an inarticulate understanding how deeply embedded isms are in our imaginations and in our actions. Race matters, as Cornel West pointed out so well in 1994, and it continues to matter today. And furthermore, even if we had accomplished something about racism directed at black folk, we have done little to address that directed at Latinos and Latinas and other skinned and white folks in this country and across the world. We must include how the color coding in U.S. society is black, white, brown, olive. Facing our history and our present realities about race is a complex thing if we are going to do it well. Because at some point, all of us will be implicated as oppressors. All of us. And most of us do not want to own that label for the things we do. But we must, so that we can get to work and become allies and freedom fighters for more than our self-interest. Counter-memory on race can teach us that the new day has already dawned, and it is, once again, being led by a younger generation like many of you in this room. These freedom-fighting younger folk are not the cheap trick stereotype of millennials as either self-entitled narcissists or open-minded do-gooders. And those of us who are older would be wise to listen to them rather than lecture them, because we need each other's wisdom to engage in the strategic fight we must wage to eradicate evil masquerading as racism or sexism or now presidential. These liberation-leaning younger folks have sparked a smart and strategic movement for social change that refuses to leave Michael Brown's body lying in state on Canfield Drive, or Philandro Castile's body as grainy cell phone footage. Speaks out loud Sandra Bland's name, recognizes the deaths of Manuel Angel Diaz and Yoel Abecedo, that is horrific, and as horrific as Freddie Gray and Eric Gardner. Brings before us all the deaths of Rexdale Henry, Sarah Lee Circlebear, Alan Locke, and far too many more Native Americans who have died in police custody. Climbs the pole with Bree Newsom to pluck evil out of the sky. Stands up for trans rights and speaks out at the atrocity of trans men and women's deaths fueled by hatred and bigotry. Speaks out against sexual violence, refuses to accept human-made poverty as inevitable, cries out in shame at an anti-Semitism that terrorizes little kids so that they're afraid to go to their daycare centers. Using counter-memory to face our past, present, and future is teaching something many of us already knew and felt. That focusing on heterosexual, cisgender men frequently causes not to see the significant amount of labor and thought leadership that women provide to movements, not only in caretaking and in auxiliary roles, but on the front lines of protests and in the strategy sessions that are happening behind closed doors. That old model of leadership favored the old over the young, attempted to silence the gay and lesbian leadership, and did not recognize the leadership possibilities of transgender people at all. And that a movement with a singular leader or a few visible leaders is vulnerable, because those leaders can be easily identified, harassed, bought off, and killed. And we have seen that happen. New organizing is focusing on building and maintaining a leader-full movement, facing the isms in us and among us, demands facing all of the siblings of the racism, our inarticulate but deadly construction of discriminations that grow up alongside of them. Our failing system of public education in far too many places, which is a school-to-prison pipeline for many Black and Latino youth. The need to dismantle the prison industrial complex to end the problem of mass incarceration of Black and Latino and poor whites. Safe and affordable housing, accessible, affordable, and excellent health care for all. Food security and reproductive justice challenges affecting poor women and all people needing access to reproductive care. Countering the intentional exclusion of trans lives with the pointed inclusion of trans folks in leadership and as spokespeople for change. So the question is, will we accept the challenge of an organic faith that seeks to eradicate injustice that is lived into lives of spirit and justice? Or will we shy away into platitudes and daydreams of another time and place where we think that difference does not matter and creation is painted in the dreary monochrome of sameness? This time and place of false safety that is not Torah or gospel, not the Spirit, not love, not hope, not salvation, not justice, not spirituality, not new heaven or new earth. My friends, we were not put on this earth to be theological ostriches. Ostriches. Not quite endangered, but definitely in decline. With a head against the soil religion that lives in big flightless bodies, using our thin legs to run fast and maneuver around not only big structural issues, but those that reside in our souls. Doubt, addiction, mental illness, loneliness, pride, fear, and more. Organic faith helps us stand and live into tomorrow like the sequoia and redwoods of California, the arches of Utah, the walls of Yosemite, and the mountain ranges of my beloved Smokies. We must allow ourselves to be shaped by a love that is rich and vital and changes lives. A love rimmed with compassion and made wise by mercy. We must live into a hope for the world that refuses to descend into despair or settles for homespun yarns of self-righteousness or quotidian tales of fear and anger that make us vindictive, abusive, unjust, and unfair. So I began with the World Book Encyclopedia to prime the pump. I shared with you that I believe in an organic faith that is less talk and more action, if it is seeking to root out injustice. I suggested that our imagination, the fantastic hegemonic sides of it, works against us when we think about race and about a lot of other things. And then argued for the remainder of this talk that counter memory can help us face ourselves, our realities, and one another. What I have not yet said is that this means that you and I must be willing to tell the truth. For without truth telling and truth listening and hearing, counter memory does not have any chance at all in countering the fantastic hegemonic imagination that makes us afraid of each other. An imagination that builds moats around our hearts, makes our faith a sham, and encourages us to believe that only folks like us are the inheritors of God's grace. If we do nothing else, we must stop spiritualizing our iniquities when it comes to the various ways we fail to live into our humanity. We must stop inept kumbayas and sashaying alleluias when our faith becomes more of a barrier than a bridge to help us see one another as human. Human, who are bodies of race and gender, sex, sexuality, age, ability, nationality, ethnicity, and all of the other ways we call ourselves living beings. If we think we have already done this work, think again. Look around. Listen to the voices of those who continue to cry out for justice. If your body is not beside them, if your mind is not attuned to the thick crap of evil, if your soul does not cry with them, if you think you've done your work, think again. Stay woke. Thank you. We have a bit of time for Q&A. Yes.
Hello. Thank you for giving
And tell me your name.
Oh, my name is Dean.
Hello, Dean.
Professor Dean. I was wondering, in what way would you describe the creation of counter-memory and how we can think it, or what the process is of building something that can fight the hegemonic imagination?
Thank you. Thank you. My greatest hope is we learn counter-memory in our religious communities. That's my greatest hope. The reality is we probably don't. But part of what is involved in counter-memory is educating yourself about the differences in our world and see them as gifts to one another. So often when we use the word difference, we think it's a barrier to understanding rather than a window to experience how wide God's creation is.
Yes.
And so educate, do some head stuff, but also put your body in places that you might not normally go. Start talking to people you might not normally talk to. And not as a project, but as one human to another. One of the things my students often ask me is, when will I know that I have attained that place that you keep telling us we should get to? And I say, quite simply, look around at those special occasions in your life. Who's there at weddings? Who's there at funerals? Who's there at birthdays? And all the other ways. I won't get into the holidays because that gets a little tense. But who's there? And then ask, who's not there? And if it's not an unconscious calling of a rich diversity of folks, and diversity can look very differently, but if it all looks like versions of ourselves, then we haven't gotten there yet. So that's one of the ways that counter-memory works, because part of what counter-memory is about is getting at those things that don't get taught in our classrooms or don't get taught in our neighborhoods. And so we have to put ourselves in other places where we'll get that learning. It may be organic, or it may be very, very abstract. But either way, that's where counter-memory starts to emerge. It's out of what we don't do as a normal. Is that helpful? Others? Yes.
Hello, my name is Jacob, and I'd like to start by thanking you for mentioning the wave of anti-Semitism that has been happening recently
You know, that's something we're trying to figure out at Vanderbilt in the Divinity School. One of the things we're learning, I think, because we're still very new at this, we only started this last year in a conscious way, is that we have to start talking to folks from other faith traditions. And not out of curiosity, but out of understanding that we need that knowledge of those different faith traditions. Not the stereotypes we see in the media, because they're almost always wrong, but they're easy, so that's why the media keeps perpetuating them. You know, I know full well that Jews are more than Barbara Streisand and Dreidel. I mean, you know, but, or that all black folk got rhythm. We don't. I mean, you go down the list. White people can't dance. Not true. I mean, it just goes, these little things that we carry around that we laugh at, but if we think about it half a second, it's like oh yeah, I do kind of think that. And if we know either one person who may represent the stereotype, there we go. We've proved it. So part of it is getting together and being in community. A program that the Muslim Center in Nashville has started through their Faith and Culture unit is called A Seat at the Table. And what that is, they don't like it to get more than 15 people, but 15 folks come together around a meal in interfaith setting. We're going to host one next week. Oh my goodness. Next week at Vanderbilt. And I've asked some faculty to come. The Muslim Center has asked some folks to come. I think there'll be one student from the college who heard about it and wants to come. And we're going to sit and we're going to listen to each other. There's no other agenda than that. But if we don't begin to understand and hear each other as human beings, then we can't figure out ways to do justice work together. Because we'll always be a caricature or a stereotype of that religion. It's the same thing that happens around race and sexuality and gender and all those things. Until we humanize ourselves, until we get a sense of the depth of what it means, we can't do that work. And hopefully, my hope is that as this unfolds, we'll begin to talk about ways we can work together on things in Nashville, things that are of common concern. One thing that is got a lot of news right now, and the Divinity School's in a little bit of hot water with the police department, is we started a series of truth and reconciliation hearings on policing last week. And the chief of police is not happy with us. But this is not about him. It's about his police force and what is happening in black and brown communities in Nashville. Because he's touting a report that somebody in Vanderbilt, I don't know who, published a report saying 80% of Nashvillians agree with the policing in Nashville and like what they see. And my immediate response was, well, who did you talk to?
Yeah.
Because that's not what's going on, even when I'm just driving through some of the predominantly black and brown communities. It is unusual for me to not see a police car stopped questioning somebody.
Right.
I don't know what's going on, I just know it's happening. So even that might be a place where an interreligious coalition could begin to talk and work and strategize together. That's a beginning question of an answer to your question.
Thank you.
Now I need to Judge Wendell doesn't know this, but we were at the Baptist Peace Fellowship annual meeting this past summer. And he preached the night before I was supposed to do a 3-hour session with the group the next morning. He literally took my entire lecture in his sermon, the whole thing, and then he left. So I had to spend the night creating something else, but I just wanted you to know you did that to me, brother. It turned out to be a better lecture, though. Yes, Judge.
Flesh and blood did not reveal that to me. How, Dean, do we employ counter-memory to deal with the painful realities of our respective histories so that we can have authentic truth and reconciliation processes instead of engaging in the euphemisms that pass for interracial dialogue, cross-cultural dialogue?
I think a key tool for counter-memory is lament. It's a good biblical thing. It's a good Christian and Jewish thing. I believe it's also a Muslim thing. But what lament is if you look at the book of Job, only 3, depending on your version of the Bible, 3 or 4 chapters long. In the first part of Joel, you see the different parts of the community being called to confess what's going on. That's a lament. And the point of a lament is that you tell the truth. You tell the truth of what's going on. You tell the truth of what you see and what you feel. And you don't do it bragging. You just tell the truth. You point out what you see, what you hear, and what you know. So from a lament, you get at not alternative facts, not post-truth. What you get at is reality. And that reality then becomes a tool of counter-memory. Because we now know what we're looking at. We're no longer believing, well, I won't go there, that's way too much into politics. Let's see. No longer believing that certain groups are lesser creatures of God. We come to understand our own complicity in it, and our own victimization in it, and the fact that we shift in and out of victim and victimizer all the time as human beings. That's counter-memory at work, getting at that truth, getting at that sense of, it may hurt, but it's not going to hurt nearly as much as continuing to create the world we have today, and stoking more fuel on the fire to make the bonfire higher and higher for how we have become with one another as a nation. So I think that's important to do. And it's also important to realize that in counter-memory, guilt becomes a very strategic tool to keep the system in place. I feel so guilty about all the sins that I did. I don't know what I can do. I mean, we slip into a kind of a kind of nihilism, a kind of despair that says there's nothing we can do. And what counter-memory says is that's a lie. There's always something we can do, however large or small it may be. So those are some of the things that come to mind fairly quickly. Other things. Yes, ma'am. Your name? I knew him.
I'm Thea.
Clea?
Thea.
Thea.
After you deal with lament, what would be the next step? And when do you get, or do you hope to end the forgiveness?
Forgiveness is way down the line.
Right.
Because so often we try to jump start to forgiveness and we haven't done the work. We just like, oh, I forgive you. No, you don't. You don't want to deal with me, is what is usually going on with a real quick start forgiveness or calls for reconciliation. Too soon, too quickly. I even take it off the table.
All right.
Until we do the harder work of from lament, you get to truth-telling, and then you can begin to name the pains. The writer, Audre Lorde, who's deceased now, in her book, Sister Outsider, has a wonderful essay, and I'm forgetting the name of the essay because I now have senior moments on the regular, so I think that just means I'm forgetful now. In the essay, she talks about a distinction between pain and suffering. For her, suffering is unmetabolized pain. And by that, she means when you're suffering, you don't know what in the world is going on. You feel bad, you look bad, you act bad, nobody wants to be around you, nobody can help you, but you're in whirlpools of misery. And you can't name what's wrong. You just know something's wrong. But pain, you can name. Pain, you can say, this is what's wrong with me, if it's individual, or this is what is wrong in our society. We're trying to get to pain, where we can name the ills amongst us. And once we can name it, then we can address it. When it has a name, there's something about naming that gives us a little bit more power to then act. Now, I often think about this in terms of the body. If you've got an illness and they don't know what it is, and they don't know what it is, and they don't know what it is, and you finally get a diagnosis, and the diagnosis is right, that's key, then doctors say, well, this is the treatment plan. Here are your options. You have some agency. You can move through it. And you can begin, maybe if we're lucky, to have questions. Well, we can take that into the public realm. If we can name that we have a broken healthcare system, and there's something wrong with the fact that millions and millions of people, even with the Affordable Care Act, are still not covered by adequate health care, let alone inadequate health care, we can then begin to do something about it. What does that mean to build a safety net for that people can just bare minimum have basic health services and not cost us more money because they're going to emergency rooms, which is a much more expensive form of health care than if you can do well care for people. So it's that kind of thing I'm thinking about. You're welcome. Others? Is that John? John?
David.
David, sorry.
When you lecture, before you talked about counter-memory, you talked about imagination. You said that imagination works against us by reinforcing or perpetuating certain characters and stereotypes. I hope I'm getting that right. And I guess I was just wondering if sort of the opposition to that is counter-memory, why you choose the word imagination to sort of capture that instead of...
It should be fantastic hegemonic imagination versus counter memory. And have you read, you had, I think you had the Cultural Production of Evil book in front of you. Have you had a chance to read it yet? Read the book and then email me. Let's talk after you've done it, because I explain it. I explain why there. For the rest of you, let me tell you this. You still have to read the book. One of the things I realized, I was writing this book on evil. I thought it would be a simple project. I don't know why I thought that, I just did. And I was doing research on the caricature of Aunt Jemima. You've seen her. She's on everything frozen for breakfast in the frozen food section. Well, she has a long history. She became the first mass marketing campaign figure in the late 1800s. And her image has morphed over the years. Something you need to know. You know that image, that stereotype of the big, happy, black, smiling Aunt Jemima? That was a lie. House servants were mulattas and mulattoes. They were not big, fat, happy, and black. They were slender because they weren't getting enough food. If you look at period pictures, not the images, not the Ladies' Home and Gardens version, but real pictures of them, you see they were thin people. When I discovered that, I realized something was going wrong, because I had always been taught the stereotype. The reality was something else. And as I was continuing to do research, I ran across a line in one of the historians who said these images were made up from the imagination of writers and artists trying to recall an idyllic South that never was. And there was that word, imagination. What's going on? How can our imagination lead us so far astray from the reality? And so I started digging some more, because that's what we do. And I came across Antonio Gramsci's understanding of the hegemonic. Now that's a real, how many of you have heard that term or have used it? Anybody? A few? Okay. Hegemony is the concept that people in power can make you think and believe that what you're feeling and being and experience is not true. They want you to believe what they want you to believe, and if they do it long enough, you'll start to believe it yourself. Well, that's the first half of Gramsci's understanding of hegemony. The other half is hegemony can also be practiced by the people out of power to gain power. I thought, hegemony, the hegemonic. Helpful tool. It cuts both ways. It calls for all kinds of responsibilities and ways in which we need to be engaged with each other. So I thought, that's not enough. There's something else going on. And I don't usually use Michel Foucault because I find him highly problematic for some other reasons. But his notion of the fantastic really became helpful for me. Those things that aren't true, that we believe are true, but they aren't true, but they are true, but maybe they're not true, but maybe so. We don't know. So combining imagination, Gramsci's understanding of the fantastic, hegemony, and Foucault's understanding of the fantastic. You get the fantastic hegemonic imagination. Or as my students like to say, the FHI. And I believe that it's something that resides in all of us. That we carry images and stereotypes in our souls, in our imaginations, and we often don't recognize the power they have over us. I mean, how many of us have been walking down the street and seeing someone that we don't quite know what's going on with them, so we either look away or we cross the street or we turn around or we duck into a building until they pass. That's the fantastic hegemonic imagination controlling us. That happens to all of us, one time or another. I would argue far too many police forces are monuments to the fantastic hegemonic imagination.
Yeah, all right.
They just assume that somebody darker skinned is up to something. And it doesn't matter where they fall on the class structure or what gender they are. I've been stopped 3 times driving while black. I'm about as middle class as you're gonna get. But I apparently didn't look like somebody I should be in the neighborhood I was in. So, police in the area pulled me over. And they always approach the car with their hand on their gun. That is not a comfortable feeling.
Right,
Let me tell you.
right.
So, even though I knew I didn't do anything. Just driving down the street, trying to get home. So that's why you have to hold them all together, because I also said at a later point, just using the word imagination, that can be a tool of counter-memory. Can we imagine ourselves into a better world and then work to build it? Not just, oh, I really want to live in a place where everybody loves somebody and we all hold hands and, you know, How do we build it? I see I've got another couple minutes, but Bobby's getting restless, so maybe not. Any last question?
Just a quick one. My name's Pratt. How do you define cisgendered? It's the second time I've heard it in the last 3 weeks, and I'm not quite sure.
It's time for you to know.
That's fine. Yeah.
You are, cisgender means you identify as the gender you were named at birth. So, I am a cisgendered woman. I was born female, I identify as female.
Gotcha. I got it.
Thank you all. Thank you for your attention.